Who really was Archimedes, the man who stepped out of a bath and shouted, "Eureka"? What transformed a boy from distant Sicily into the greatest mind of the ancient world? This is no ordinary tale of a scholar. It's a story of fierce intellect, desperate innovation, and choices that shaped history's fate. And yet, what drove him? Fear? Ambition? Or something deeper, an obsession to unravel the universe itself? The answers lie buried in the shadows of time, waiting to be unearthed. Friends, be sure to subscribe to my Quiet History channel, like it, and leave a comment of at least 7 words. This is necessary for the channel to function. Share this video with others if you think it's important. Thank you. Syracuse was no mere city. It was a fortress of Greek culture beyond the mainland, a bustling state on the island of Sicily, encircled by unyielding walls and endless sea. Its markets roared with merchants from every corner of the Mediterranean. Temples towered, theaters thrived, and its harbor teemed with ships bearing the world's wealth. Yet this prosperity was fragile, balanced on the razor's edge of alliances, wars, and fragile diplomacy. Into this crucible, Archimedes was born, around 3 centuries before the Common Era. His world was already a powder keg, and his mind would become its spark. His family belonged to the respected class of learned citizens. Archimedes' father, Phidias, was an astronomer, a man who never left written records but ignited in his son a burning fascination with numbers, stars, and celestial motion. Imagine a boy, eyes fixed on the heavens, learning not through formal lessons but through whispered conversations at the dinner table, observing eclipses and debating with scholars under the night sky. This inheritance was no mere education. It was a way of life, a relentless quest to decode the cosmos. Yet the boy's genius was more than inherited curiosity. It was an unyielding hunger to understand. Why do stars move the way they do? Why does the circle maintain its unerring ratio to its diameter? Why does water always flow down, never sideways? For hours he would sit on the cold floor, drawing in the sand, his mind racing through invisible calculations. Here was a mind that refused to rest, driven not by rote learning, but by piercing questions that gnawed at the very fabric of reality. But genius alone does not forge legends. Archimedes emerged from an extraordinary environment, Syracuse, a hub of Hellenistic science enriched by the conquests of Alexander the Great. Knowledge flowed from Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, blending into this vibrant city. Scholars, philosophers, and engineers gathered here, their heated debates echoing through palace halls. It was here that young Archimedes encountered his destiny under the gaze of Hiero II, the pragmatic ruler who saw science not as abstract thought, but as a weapon of power. Hiero was consolidating his rule, hungry for advantage. He likely heard whispers of a quiet boy obsessed with geometry and numbers, always clutching a drawing tablet. Yet, to the world, Archimedes was still just a boy lost in thought, silent, distant, consumed by his puzzles. Even in youth he was no mere student, but a relentless seeker, rediving Euclid's theorems on his own terms. When solutions eluded him, he starved. He stayed awake, driven by a need that overpowered rest and hunger alike. This was no stubbornness. It was a compulsion to reach the very foundation of truth, to strip away every layer until nothing remained but certainty. Meanwhile, life in Syracuse demanded more than the mind. Here, boys learned to swim, to row boats, to throw spears, and run rugged paths. Archimedes was no warrior. He lacked brute strength. But from an early age, his heart beat for the unseen forces, the principles that governed water, levers, pulleys, and the very mechanics of the world. His inventions were not just experiments. They were weapons against Rome. While armies feared swords and shields, Rome's legions trembled before one man's intellect. Archimedes built machines that halted entire armies, turning knowledge into a terrifying defense. Yet his final moments were shrouded in tragedy, a death that transformed into legend. Why did Rome kill the mind that could have changed the fate of empires? What irreversible choices led to that fatal confrontation? Archimedes was more than a teacher. He was a seeker of the world's very essence. His death did not silence his legacy, but immortalized the mysteries he left behind, puzzles that continue to challenge us, echoing through the corridors of time. His story is a relentless wave of decisions and consequences, a testament to fear, ambition, and the irreversible power of one human mind against the tides of history. This is just the beginning. Join Quiet History as we dive deeper into the lives that shaped our world. Suggest topics for future stories and subscribe, because here, history is not just told, it is lived, breathed, and felt every day. What drives a young mind to dismantle toys only to rebuild them differently? What stirs the insatiable curiosity behind questions like how a ship's sail holds strong, or why a vessel defies the sea's pull? These were not mere childish fancies for Archimedes. They were the seeds of a revolutionary mind. From these mechanical puzzles, he began to uncover truths that would eventually reshape the world. But even then, his quest for balance and understanding hinted at something far greater, a method born from a relentless search for the hidden order beneath chaos. The stage was set for a legacy born not of chance, but of a fateful decision, to see life through the lens of mathematics as a living force. Yet the greatest challenge awaited beyond his home in Syracuse. In his youth, Archimedes did not separate math from life. To him, formulas were no abstract scribbles. They reflected the very nature of reality. He did not merely calculate. He endeavored to feel the motion of bodies, the pull of forces, the flow of fluids. These early sketches and proofs, possibly crafted in Syracuse, marked the beginning of a profound journey. But local wisdom could no longer contain his ambitions. When he turned roughly 20, a decisive call sent him to Alexandria, the epicenter of knowledge in the Hellenistic world, a crucible where minds collided and new truths were born. This was no comfortable passage, but a leap into the unknown, driven by an urgent need to challenge and be challenged. Alexandria, at the dawn of the 3rd century BCE, was more than a city. It was a beacon of intellect, a fortress of knowledge. Under Ptolemy's command, grand libraries, observatories, and laboratories rose along Egypt's shore, unlike anything Greece had ever seen. The Great Museum, home of the Muses, gathered philosophers, astronomers, mathematicians, and physicians beneath its vast roof, a gathering of minds that would alter the course of history. Archimedes arrived not as a spectator, but as a fierce contender, ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with the era's greatest thinkers. The pressure to prove oneself here was immense. Failure meant fading into obscurity. In this crucible, Archimedes found himself amid the heirs of Euclid, the master whose elements had laid the groundwork for geometry. Though Euclid had passed, his disciples continued to teach, and from them Archimedes received a structured education. Yet he was no passive learner. When presented with a theorem, he demanded more than acceptance. He sought origins, connections, consequences. How did it arise? How did it relate to other truths? What if conditions shifted? His relentless questioning often irritated his teachers, but it forged in him a unique, systemic approach to thought. This restless scrutiny was not just rebellion, it was the forge where his own monumental system began to take shape. Among his most profound encounters was with Eratosthenes, the polymath who first measured the Earth's circumference. Philosopher, mathematician, geographer, and poet, Eratosthenes became both a mentor and a worthy adversary. Their dialogues extended beyond mathematics into the cosmos itself. How to gauge distances, how to grasp the curvature of the Earth. Could geometry bridge the tangible and the abstract? Their debates were fierce, their intellects intertwined in a dance of challenge and revelation. It was Eratosthenes who nudged Archimedes to see math not as static figures drawn on sand, but as a powerful tool to decipher nature's secrets, to model flow, predict motion, describe forces. Within the hallowed walls of the museum, Archimedes began crafting more than proofs. He sketched models, mentally spun objects through space, testing how they responded to unseen forces. These were not idle exercises. They were precursors to his later groundbreaking treatises. Some historians speculate that here, in Alexandria, he first encountered the hydraulic screw, an ingenious device for lifting water that he would refine and immortalize. He might have studied the works of Heron or collaborated with Egyptian engineers who built intricate irrigation systems. Each discovery, each idea, was a step deeper into the labyrinth of knowledge, setting traps for future giants to stumble upon. Years later, Archimedes' profound insights would culminate in the legendary moment involving a crown and pure gold. Measuring displaced water, comparing weights, volumes, and densities, he proved deceit concealed in precious metal. But this was more than a triumph of science. It was the outcome of a chain of critical decisions, each fraught with pressure and risk. The young man who once played with toys had become the mind that altered rulers' fates and challenged the very fabric of truth. His journey from Syracuse to Alexandria was not merely a passage in space, but a journey of irrevocable choices, each echoing through history like ripples in a vast ocean of consequence. This chapter ends here, but the story of Archimedes, his relentless pursuit of understanding, his defiance of limits, and his battle with the unknown, was only beginning. The seeds planted in Alexandria would soon bear fruit that shaped not just science, but the very way humans confront fear, uncertainty, and the irreversible weight of decisions. To follow his path is to step into a maelstrom of intellect and fate, where every question could ignite a revolution, and every answer could change the world. Subscribe to Quiet History to journey deeper into the lives of those who changed our world with their choices and courage. Every story reveals the human heart behind the equations, the tension behind the triumphs, and the irreversible choices that define us all. What if a simple crown could reveal a king's deepest betrayal? How could a moment of truth forever change the course of science? Archimedes faced a challenge that wasn't solved by force or threats, but by knowledge, an explosive discovery that would lay the foundation for one of physics' most fundamental laws. The question wasn't just about proving a forgery. It was about understanding the invisible forces shaping our world. But what happened next would shatter everything they thought they knew. Archimedes declared a principle that stunned the ancient world. Every object submerged in a fluid experiences an upward force equal to the weight of the fluid it displaces. This wasn't just a scientific curiosity. It was a revelation that explained why stones sink and wooden rafts float, why mighty iron ships refuse to founder beneath the waves. This insight went beyond the crown scandal. It became the bedrock of hydrostatics, underpinning everything from ships to dams to floating balloons. Yet the king's question was only the surface of a far deeper truth waiting to be uncovered. The moment Archimedes cried, "Eureka!" was not simply a lightning bolt of inspiration. It was the climax of relentless study, endless observation, and fierce intellectual rigor. What the world remembers as a burst of genius was in reality the outcome of years of methodical work, where abstract mathematics met gritty reality. He didn't just find an answer. He cracked open a new path to understanding the universe. But would his genius be enough to withstand the storm brewing on the horizon? Archimedes' discoveries went far beyond the crown. He authored detailed treatises on floating bodies, exploring how the distribution of mass affects an object's stability in fluid. His work anticipated hydrostatics by centuries, dissecting the invisible battles of forces that decide life and death on the water's surface. This wasn't academic theory. It was knowledge that could save cities, armies, and empires. Yet this quiet mathematician was about to face his greatest test, not from equations, but from war and power. Archimedes was more than a thinker. He was a builder, an engineer whose workshop in Syracuse resembled a laboratory of wonders. Models, experiments, and machines filled his space, each invention born from real civic needs or looming military threats. The legendary Archimedes screw, an ingenious spiral for lifting water, was refined here, transforming ancient technology into a powerful tool for irrigation and defense. Every calculation had a purpose, every design a deadly seriousness. But the shadows of Rome were closing in, threatening to turn science into survival. He didn't stop at water. Archimedes harnessed the power of levers and pulleys so masterfully that he claimed, "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth." This wasn't bravado. It was a testament to the might of mathematical precision applied to mechanics. His inventions promised to multiply human strength beyond imagination. Yet these mechanical marvels would soon be pitted against an overwhelming force that no lever could shift: Rome's relentless ambition. When Rome threatened Syracuse in the 3rd century before Christ, Archimedes transformed from scholar to strategist. His genius was the city's last hope against an empire bent on conquest. Every device he crafted, defensive machines, catapults, complex pulleys, was born of desperation and brilliance intertwined. This was no longer pure science. It was a battle of wills, a clash where knowledge was weaponized, and the stakes were life or death. Could a mind outmatch the might of an empire?
Despite his towering intellect and practical genius, Archimedes never sought power or fame. His authority came from one immutable source: undeniable evidence. Kings and citizens alike sought his counsel, not because he craved influence, but because his ideas carried the weight of proof. The crown episode was not just a triumph of science. It was an early testament to reason over suspicion, intellect over tyranny. But as history would show, reason alone would not guarantee survival. The Eureka moment, so often mythologized, was just one chapter in Archimedes' relentless pursuit of understanding. He was a pioneer who bridged theory and practice, turning abstract formulas into machines that shaped everyday life and war. His legacy was not confined to scrolls or theories, but lived in the water that flowed through Syracuse, in the pulleys that lifted the heavy burdens, in the tactics that held back invaders. Yet the choices he made in that volatile era would seal his fate and the fate of his city. The story of Archimedes is not merely about a brilliant mind solving puzzles. It is a saga of human fear, irreversible decisions, and the crushing weight of consequences. When faced with Rome's inexorable advance, the line between genius and tragedy blurred. Archimedes had to wield his intellect not just for discovery, but for survival. Each invention was a gamble, each calculation a desperate bet against doom. The tension between knowledge and power reached a fever pitch, and every choice rippled toward an uncertain, fateful end. This is the story of Archimedes, mathematician, engineer, philosopher, whose legacy was forged not in peace, but amid the rising storm of war. His breakthroughs transformed science and society, proving that understanding could challenge deception and that reason could serve justice. Yet behind every triumph lay the shadow of conflict, testing whether knowledge alone could conquer human fear and the ruthless march of history. Subscribe to Quiet History to witness how one man's irreversible choices forever shape the world we live in. What happens when a city finds itself crushed between two unstoppable forces, when loyalty becomes a deadly game of survival? The leaders of Syracuse faced a choice: cling to Carthage or shift allegiance to Rome, and that choice would seal their fate. After the death of Hiero II, his successors made a critical political blunder. By the year 214 before our era, Rome had launched a brutal siege against Syracuse. The city stood on the brink, outnumbered by enemy legions, fleet blockading the coast, walls trembling under threat. Their survival seemed impossible. But then came Archimedes, not just a thinker, but a force unlike any other. Not a commander shouting orders, but a mind turning science into deadly art. His inventions reshaped the battlefield. Catapults, ballistae, and terrifying siege weapons hurled destruction with precision no one expected. Roman soldiers watched in disbelief as their missiles fell short, while Syracuse's stones struck true, tearing through ships and soldiers alike. Archimedes didn't rely on brute force, but on exact calculations, angles, tension, trajectories. Each shot a calculated strike from a master strategist. He even engineered weapons with variable range, shifting effortlessly from near to far targets by altering simple levers. Among his most legendary devices was the iron hand, a crane-like machine that lifted Roman ships out of the water, rocking them violently before casting them down in chaos and fear. Though some historians question the full truth of these tales, ancient sources agree on one chilling fact. Syracuse's defense wasn't just stubborn. It was terrifyingly precise. The legend of Archimedes' burning mirrors took this to another level. Polished bronze shields focused sunlight, igniting Roman ships. Skeptics debate if it truly worked, but the idea itself reveals how Archimedes harnessed not only iron and stone, but light, heat, and geometry as weapons. These machines weren't clumsy monstrosities. They embodied physics and mathematics. Every device was designed with exact principles: moments of force, centers of gravity, pressure distribution, calculated, modeled, crafted with relentless precision. Roman commanders found themselves baffled. Their forces couldn't breach the walls. Their ships dared not anchor near the shore. Soldiers whispered rumors. The city's defender was no mere man, but a sorcerer wielding the power of the gods. Legend says Consul Marcellus cried out, "Give me 100 Archimedes, and I will conquer the world." He understood that he faced not just a man, but the force of science, weaponized for war. The siege dragged on for 2 long years. All the while, Archimedes' machines stood as a relentless barrier, extending Syracuse's resistance far beyond any expectation. Archimedes became living proof that knowledge can surpass brute strength, and intellect can fortify walls better than stone ever could. Though Syracuse eventually fell, Archimedes left behind a legacy that outlived walls, ships, and armies. His machines inspired engineers for generations. His formulas laid the groundwork for mechanics. His name became a symbol of human thought, standing firm between destruction and salvation. In this chapter, Archimedes was not a philosopher or a mere theorist. He was an engineer, a defender, an inventor, a man who proved that true genius needs no title to alter the course of history. Today, when we call Archimedes a great inventor or engineer, we often forget what else he left behind. Not just formulas, but a style. A testament that precision is respect for truth, complexity is a path, and mathematics is not just tools, but a way to understand the universe. When the Romans finally entered Syracuse, the city was broken. 2 years of siege, destruction, and internal strife had drained its strength. The choices made, the risks taken, they all led to this inevitable collapse. Follow Quiet History for more tales where human fear, fragile decisions, and relentless consequences shape the fate of civilizations. What happens when a brilliant mind clashes with the brutal force of war? Who decides the fate of a genius when a city falls? And what price is paid when reason meets chaos? These questions set the stage for the tragic final hours of Archimedes in the besieged city of Syracuse. The once impregnable walls of Syracuse had been shattered, the garrison partially annihilated. Streets overflowed with soldiers, their faces hungry for loot and victory. Among them was Marcus Claudius Marcellus, the Roman commander, who had spent 2 grueling years trying to break through, not by brute strength alone, but by the very mind of Archimedes. Marcellus understood what others could not. This was no ordinary man. Archimedes wasn't just a mathematician or engineer. He was the force that held back the Roman tide through calculations and contraptions, not swords and shields. The Roman general forbade any harm befall the scholar, hoping to capture him alive, not for trial or spectacle, but to honor him, perhaps even to win him over. Yet in the chaos of the city's fall, orders dissolved into disorder. Soldiers ran rampant through homes, chasing gold, food, weapons, and the fragile thread protecting Archimedes unraveled in those first frantic hours. The great mind was isolated, secluded in his workshop, lost in the silent world of geometry, where lines and circles held more meaning than the screaming war outside. Did Archimedes even realize the city had been taken? Or did he choose to ignore it, immersed in his work? His focus was absolute, a profound detachment that made him unaware of even the most violent intrusion. When a Roman soldier entered his sanctuary, Archimedes did not rise, did not plead for life. He merely lifted his head and uttered the words, "Do not disturb my circles." Those words, simple yet profound, fell on deaf ears. The soldier, ignorant of the man's identity and significance, saw only defiance from an old man. No mercy was granted. By sword, spear, or reckless strike, no one remembers which, Archimedes was struck down in the dust of his own courtyard. The name of the soldier was lost to history, but the act echoed through time as a senseless tragedy. When Marcellus learned of the death, he was shattered. Plutarch tells us the Roman commander was deeply disturbed, condemning the soldier's crime against intellect itself. He ordered that Archimedes be buried with full honors, a gesture too late to save the man or his work. The city was taken, Archimedes' machines destroyed, and his workshop ransacked, a monument to human brilliance lost in the ruins. "Do not disturb my circles" was more than a plea to protect fragile drawings. It embodied Archimedes' world view. For him, truth and reason transcended politics, war, and death. He existed in a realm where everything had cause and effect, where even death was but a point in an endless chain of logic. He did not flee nor beg for mercy, because such things had no meaning in his equation of life. Years later, legend says Marcellus ordered a tomb to be erected for Archimedes, marked by the symbol of a sphere inscribed in a cylinder, the discovery that filled Archimedes with the greatest pride. Yet, as Cicero recounted a century later, this monument had fallen into neglect, overgrown with weeds and forgotten by time, until Cicero himself uncovered it as a young quaestor, clearing away the brush. So nearly vanished the memory of the man who could move the universe with his mind alone. But the silence that followed his death was not eternal. Archimedes' words were remembered, his formulas preserved, and the faint lines he drew in the sand endured. His death became a symbol, the tragic collision of reason and raw power, a reminder that even the greatest minds are fragile in the face of war's chaos. He was no warrior, yet feared, no king, yet revered. When he died, all that remained was silence, the quiet grave of a mind unmatched in history. But that silence was broken by the echo of his legacy, carried forward by philosophers and scientists who refused to let his voice fade into oblivion. Archimedes' story is a chain of fateful choices and missed chances, where respect was overtaken by violence and genius was extinguished by ignorance. It forces us to ask, can reason survive in a world ruled by force? And what price do we pay when we lose sight of humanity in the pursuit of conquest? If this story moved you, subscribe to Quiet History to uncover more moments where human courage, intellect, and tragedy collide in the sweep of time. What happens when brilliance meets brutal fate? Can a warrior's sword erase a mind's legacy? On the day Archimedes fell in Syracuse, truth seemed to die with him. Yet no soldier could truly destroy the legend that survived his mortal end. His name echoed beyond the battlefield, refusing to fade into oblivion. Even in Rome, where his death was no secret, reverence endured. Cicero, in his youth as a quaestor in Syracuse, sought out Archimedes' neglected tomb and restored it with deliberate care. Yet, paradoxically, the vast majority of Archimedes' works faded into silence for centuries. They existed, but were left unread, untranslated, and excluded from the era's educational canon. Why was such genius relegated to obscurity? Because the language he used and the depth of his reasoning were too complex for the common scholars of the time. His thoughts were a code few could crack, a labyrinth too dense for the average mind. Still, his writings did not vanish entirely. Some manuscripts survived in private collections, monasteries, and in the libraries of Eastern and Byzantine scholars. The Byzantine mathematician Isidore of Miletus, in the 6th century, cited Archimedes and acknowledged his profound influence. But the most remarkable journey was yet to come, one that bridged worlds and centuries. Medieval Arab scholars such as Thabit ibn Qurra and al-Biruni studied Greek mathematics and mechanical treatises, embracing Archimedes' ideas as a foundation. Through the Arab world, in the 12th and 13th centuries, Archimedes' works were reintroduced to Europe, reigniting a dormant flame of knowledge. Then came the extraordinary discovery of the Archimedes palimpsest, a manuscript overwritten by a prayer book in the 10th and 13th centuries. For centuries, this hidden treasure lay buried beneath layers of text, its true value concealed from sight. It wasn't until the 19th century that scholars realized beneath the sacred writings lay ancient mathematical marvels. In the early 20th century, modern technology, X-ray fluorescence, and other imaging methods unveiled Archimedes' revolutionary ideas. It became clear just how far ahead of his time he was, how his concepts transcended the scientific understanding of centuries that followed. Galileo Galilei revered Archimedes as his intellectual forebear, despite the gulf of nearly 2,000 years. Galileo pored over Archimedes' treatises on the equilibrium of planes and wielded his principles to shape the new mechanics of his own era. Archimedes was the first to merge theory with observation, the rare mind who truly grasped nature's workings. Leonardo da Vinci, too, was captivated by Archimedes' inventions. Though seldom citing his sources outright, Da Vinci meticulously copied mechanisms and studied schematics, striving to recreate the ingenious designs. Levers, gears, water pumps, all bore the unmistakable mark of Archimedes' enduring influence. Isaac Newton, the father of classical mechanics, openly acknowledged the debt he owed to Archimedes. While Newton wielded the calculus of limits and derivatives, The foundational concepts, the method of exhaustion, infinitesimals, mentally dissecting bodies, were all Archimedes' groundwork, laid millennia before modern terminology existed.
Yet perhaps Archimedes' greatest legacy is not his formulas or inventions. It is the relentless pursuit of knowledge, the rigorous, logical, experimentally grounded approach that became the bedrock of scientific inquiry. The pathway of thought he carved was a turning point in humanity's quest to understand the universe. How many other geniuses have been swallowed by the tides of time, their voices stifled by war, ignorance, or fear? Archimedes' story is a testament to the power of ideas to survive the darkest nights and the cruelest blows. It compels us to ask, what truths today lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting to change the course of history? So if you think the past is just a dusty collection of old stories, think again. Archimedes' legacy challenges us all to look deeper, think harder, and never accept the finality of silence. Subscribe to Quiet History and unearth the untold stories that shape our world.